music is just accidental. It just happens in the world. You know, you go into a store, you go into a restaurant, gas station,
Right.
even something pops up on your screen and you're just hearing all this random accidental, and most of it isn't even that good.
Right.
or it's
I agree.
distinctly not good
Right.
music. Whereas I believe we should be looking to use music more intentionally. Kind of like literature or food. It's something that feeds our mind and feeds our soul.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am so glad you are back with me this week. This is part of our Homeschooling Every Subject series that we are in right now. I know you guys have been listening to this, and this has been a really fun series. And so if you're watching this on video, you might notice that I'm in my studio and my guest is in person with me this week, Andrew Pudewa. And we're actually going to do 2 weeks with Andrew. So here's what happened. We got to the subject of language arts, and I thought, well, I can't think of anyone better to talk about language arts and teaching language arts in our homeschool than Andrew. I mean, you kind of the language arts expert, right? I just think of, Andrew Pudewa. That's what most people think of. So I invited you to come in, and for those who don't know, you live just a few minutes from us. And so we thought it would be fun. The IEW headquarters are here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so it's just more fun to have you in the studio. So I thought, let's have Andrew come and talk about language arts. Well, then I wanted to do a whole episode on music and the importance of music. And we were thinking and praying about this. And Garrett said, why don't you ask Andrew? There's no one who knows more about music and the importance of music and teaching it in your homeschool than Andrew. And I thought, well, that's perfect. He's already going to be in the studio. So Andrew is spending a whole 2 hours with me today in the studio, and we are going to talk about music today. And then next week, we're going to come back with Andrew again, and we're going to talk about language arts. So when you see that we're wearing the same clothing, it's because we are recording this all in the same day. Garrett actually said, are you going to do a wardrobe change? I said, no, because Andrew's not going to, so I'll just wear the same thing, and people will know that we recorded it all at the same time.
I could, if you need to.
You could borrow one of Garrett's shirts.
Put on a different shirt. But.
Yeah. Or just turn that one inside out. That might work too. Anyway, we are so glad to be, for you guys to be with us today. We're glad to be with you too. And we're going to have a great time this week talking about music and the importance of that in our homeschool. But before we get started, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for great homeschool curriculum that's taught from a solid biblical worldview for any subject, any grade, any age, check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. And they've got something for everyone. If you don't know what you need, call them up and speak with one of their consultants and they can help guide you. bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Andrew, welcome back to the studio. It's been a while. You've been here before in my studio talking about all sorts of different things. You've been on the Thinking Dad podcast. You're just kind of part of our world. And so for those who might not be familiar with Andrew Pudewa or the Institute for Excellence in Writing, introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, short version, let's see. I started IEW in 94. So we're coming up on 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing to me. Been living in Tulsa since 2009, so coming up on 15 years. Time passes quickly. We publish curriculum for teaching the arts of language, listening, speaking, reading, and kind of our focus is writing. And we serve homeschoolers all over the world. We also serve schools, charter schools, Christian schools, a lot of classical schools use our curriculum. We've been growing rapidly, so that's good. Perhaps what a lot of people don't know is that I don't have any kind of academic training in either education or English composition. My training is in music. Mm-hmm. And so I was, for the first third or so of my adult life, just full-time teaching Suzuki violin and kinder music. And I started IEW kind of as a side gig to figure out how can I make a little extra money so I can afford to be a music teacher and keep my wife home and homeschool our kids. What's more important than that? I have 7 grown children, 17 grandchildren, with one on the way.
Wow. And
I would let everyone out there know grandchildren are the absolute best thing about living and plan now, have as many as you can possibly figure out how to get. And hopefully some of them will live near you when you're old, because it is really a phenomenal joy. You get all the best parts of parenting with very little of the stress. So I recommend it. Grandchildren.
Yes, I hear that. I feel like, we inch a little bit closer to that each day as our girls are growing up. And I do look forward to those years of being a grandparent. And that will be so fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love seeing you on Facebook. And I only have Facebook, so I get to see pictures of you sometimes with your grandkids and interacting with them. And that's really
well,
really
I try to post little videos on Instagram and TikTok too. My mother was a music teacher.
Okay.
So I grew up in a home. She taught piano and voice.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up playing the violin. I started as a Suzuki kid in Southern California when it was very, very new. Mm-hmm. I was 5 years old, and then I played the violin all through childhood. Quit for a few years in high school, as oftentimes, high schoolers want to do something else. And then I came back to it as a young adult, and then ended up going to Japan to study with Dr. Suzuki of the Suzuki method or talent education. And then got into the world of teaching music, which I love tremendously.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it paid better. If I could have figured out how to leverage it into a little better income, I might still just be doing that.
Yeah. Well, you could start the Institute for Excellence in Music. IEM.
I'm not sure I'm called to that at the moment. And one of the probably most interesting things I've learned over the last decade or so is the relationship between music and language development. Okay. And so that's kind of where I often will start. Language is tonal. It's rhythmic and tonal. If I kept saying the same thing, hohoya, 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 you would pretty soon get the idea that this pair of glasses is a hohoya, which is not in any language that I'm aware of. But it's interesting because that's where children begin with understanding words, is hearing tones in context. So as we sensitize children toward subtle tone differentiation, we're actually improving their ability to discern and understand and ultimately use language.
Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, "I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children." If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. Join Apologia for the Homeschool Bootcamp, a free video series that provides practical guidance and wisdom from experienced homeschool parents. You'll discover how to equip your family for academic, social, and spiritual success. Plus, you'll discover how to build deeper and stronger family relationships. Homeschool Bootcamp covers how to break free from the public school mindset, daily planning, supporting students with learning challenges, homeschooling as a working parent, navigating the high school years, and much more. Find this incredible free homeschool resource at apologia.com/bootcamp.
As we sensitize children toward subtle tone differentiation, we're actually improving their ability to discern and understand and ultimately use language. And then if we look, of course, at the refinement, the very small differentiations in, say, accent, or even just within a family. I'm sure you've had the experience of, calling someone and wondering, is that her or is that her daughter?
Right.
Because they sound so similar. And so children develop this extraordinary refined nuance of language, and it's all tonal. So one of the things I've been promoting in terms of language arts development is an idea of focused listening for young children in particular. And, we kind of have music is just accidental. It just happens in the world. You go into a store, you go into a restaurant, gas station,
Right.
even something pops up on your screen, and you're just hearing all this random accidental, and most of it isn't even that good.
Right.
or it's
I agree.
distinctly not good
Right.
music. Whereas I believe we should be looking to use music more intentionally, kind of like literature or food. It's something that feeds our mind and feeds our soul and cultivates our listening skills. One of the things at IEW we say is the 4 arts of language are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. If you think about listening and speaking, well, we have a word in English to hear, but then we also have a word to listen.
Right.
And they're not quite the same, right? Hearing happens all the time. Unless you're hearing impaired or deaf, you hear. Listen, however, is a little more intentional, kind of a transitive verb. You have to listen to something. You listen for something. And so I've been kind of trying to promote this idea that listening is a skill that can be cultivated. And the best place to start is with focused listening of music.
That's so interesting because my family and I are very different. The 3 other members of my family are very good at listening to music. I hear music. And what I mean by that is music almost always for me is just background noise. I don't hear the lyrics. Rarely do I hear the lyrics unless it's worship music or I'm worshiping in church. But typically when I have music on, my mind is thinking of a million other things and I'm not hearing any of the lyrics. And so therefore I don't learn the songs. The other 3 members of my family, they'll hear a song a few times and they could almost repeat back word for word the entire song, lyric for lyric, because they're listening to the words of the music, not just the sound of the music. And so that's so interesting to me because, and I find myself oftentimes, even as my kids are talking to me or if my husband's talking to me, I'm hearing them, but I'm not listening to them. And I'll have to say, wait a minute. You're going to have to repeat what you just said because I heard you, but I have no idea what you just said. I know your voice is talking in the background, but it's weird. And I struggle with that actually, because I know I miss out on a lot of things because I hear, but I don't listen.
Well, I would suggest that you could try this idea, which is the same idea I suggest that parents use with young children, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And that is to actually use non-vocal music. Use some instrumental music and start with one of the great composers, probably Bach, because Bach is the best. But, Handel, Vivaldi, Mozart, Beethoven. But take just a few minutes, for a young child, maybe 3 minutes of a great piece of, a section of a great piece of music by Bach. Now, here's the trick. Play that music and have them listen to it or hear it 3, 4, 5 times a day for a week.
The same music.
The same 3 minutes.
Okay.
So if you listen to the same 3 minutes of music 3 to 5 times a day for, 5, 6 days a week, you're going to be getting a repetition of around 20 times. So what will happen is with that high of a repetition, a child will memorize that music. They will hear it, and 2 phenomenal things happen. Number 1 is they become more attentive because they have an expectation. So you kind of know the music, you know what's going to happen, so you're listening for what's going to happen.
Right.
And when and so that there's a focus that comes from repetition. We pay more attention to things we're more familiar with than things that are completely new or random.
Sure.
Right? So there's a cultivation of attentiveness. And then the second thing is that as the thing they expect to happen happens, there's a burst of joy. There's a feeling of fulfillment. Like I knew that, was going to climax that way. They wouldn't say that, but their soul is following along. And so when what we expect or hope to happen happens, there's a burst of joy. So focused listening to great music for young children creates attentiveness and joy and an aptitude for listening to more good and great music as well.
Yeah. That is very interesting. I never have thought about it in terms of music, but I'm thinking of it like, I drive a dark gray Honda Odyssey. Well, now I see every dark gray Honda Odyssey on the road because I just notice it more because I'm familiar with it and I expect it. And so now, there's a sea of them all over town. And so it seems like that's similar where like you're just familiar with the thing. And so that's becomes what your mind kind of goes to.
Sure.
You recognize it more because you're most familiar with it.
There's a happiness with familiarity.
Yeah.
You see this with young children and picture books or little books that they'll let you read that book again and again and again and again. Why? Same reason.
Right.
Each time they're understanding it a little better, anticipating a little more what's coming next.
Right.
And then when what they anticipate happens, there's a joy in that.
Right.
And so music and language are very connected that way.
Yeah.
And, if you look at kind of the history of humanity, mothers have been singing to their children from birth.
Yeah.
In fact, most cultures, mothers will sing to children before they even talk to them all that much.
Yeah.
So there's that tonal sensitivity. And when they start to differentiate subtleties in tone, that carries over into the understanding of words.
Yeah.
And the storage of words, and then the imitation of words. And it starts the entire language development pathway. So that's one of the profound benefits of having music in young children's life. But again, if you do it intentionally, then you can use repetition to the advantage. And if you don't play good, beautiful music, then, children will pick up whatever junk is in their environment.
Right.
And same thing with language development and poetry and all that.
Yeah.
But so you have this absorbent mind, as Maria Montessori said, the absorbent mind, the brain of a child is growing so fast in the first 6 years of life. Yeah. And the more you stimulate that, the more the brain grows. And so music, I think, is probably the most important thing, both on the listening and trying to use repetition and focus. And as they get older, you can expand the time period from, 2 or 3 minutes to 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 minutes. And of course, it's also nice for them to start noticing what they're hearing and understanding, what instrument is that?
Right.
And are there multiple instruments? And helping them understand, is it in a major key? Is it in a minor key? And just learning some of the basics of how instruments create music. And then, of course, they'll want to, sing along and do all that. And that's a natural faculty. But I would say to parents, that's probably way more important than anyone imagines.
Yeah.
Is the presence of music in young children's lives.
Yeah. I want to talk further about that. We're out of time for this episode, but tomorrow I want to come back and talk about music in young children's lives and the kind of music besides listening to classical music and how that plays a role in their lives.
Right.
But we're out of time.
Playing musical instruments and what that does for the brain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We will talk about that as well. Right. But we're out of time. So we will be back. I said tomorrow, but I meant Wednesday. What I meant was Wednesday.
But you know your schedule.
We'll be back on Wednesday to talk more about music and the importance of music in our homeschool. And we're going to get to the question too about what about the parent who is not musical at all? We won't answer that because I am not musical at all. But Andrew is. And so he's here to teach us about it. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you guys for being with us. If you've not yet watched the movie that Andrew Pudewa is in, Schoolhouse Rocked, The Homeschool Revolution, you guys can stream it for free through our website, schoolhouserocked.com, and you can find all sorts of other great stuff there. Have a great rest of your day. Stay tuned to the very end to hear what's coming up next, and we will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.
We've got an urgent situation. If we knew we were in a war zone, which we are because we live in the middle of a spiritual battle, we would not say, well, let's take a few days off while the battle's going on. We're called the spiritual battle. Let's step up and take responsibility for that.
Even if we're able to push the evildoers and the totalitarians back for another generation, if they've got the young people, it's over.
I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel to be able to go into Babylon and not fall.
This is Yvette Hampton, host of The Thinking Dad. Join us for the first season at thinkingdad.net.
Music has very significant impacts on your physiology.
Yeah.
And that's something people often don't think about.
Right.
So as you are, homeschooling and creating your environment, your home culture, you get to decide what comes through the speakers. And, if a mom grew up not necessarily experiencing good music, that doesn't mean they can't learn
Sure.
and bring that to children.